The night Mary Lynn was traded away, the rain came down like judgment from heaven. The townsfolk of Dry Creek still whisper about it, the way her mother, Ruth, dragged her out of their crumbling shack with one hand gripping her daughter's wrist and the other clutching a rope tied to a scrawny cow. Mary, 17, soft-bodied and wide-eyed, stumbled barefoot through the mud, clutching her swollen belly as thunder rolled over the plains. Her mother's words cut deeper than any knife. "You've brought shame to this family, girl. I won't feed another mouth because of your sins." Ruth's voice cracked, but not from sorrow, from bitterness. The neighbors watched from behind their curtains, their lamps flickering like judgmental eyes. No one stepped out. No one ever did when Ruth Lynn was angry. Mary didn't even know where they were going until the wagon lights appeared through the storm. The figure driving it was enormous, broad shoulders hunched under a soaked leather coat, a hat dripping rain down a face half hidden by a beard. They called him the giant cowboy, though few had ever seen him up close. Some said he lived alone on the edge of the canyon. Others claimed he wasn't a man at all, but something older, something born from the dust and thunder of the West. His name was Caleb Boone, and his size wasn't the only thing that made him strange. He rarely came into town, and when he did, no one dared meet his gaze. Ruth yanked Mary forward, her breath hissing through her teeth. "You said you'd pay," she told Caleb, her voice trembling. "1 cow for the girl. That's the deal." Caleb's eyes glowed faintly in the lantern light as he looked from the mother to the daughter. His voice, when it came, was low and slow as rolling thunder. "A cow for a child," he said. "That's a cruel trade, even for this land." Ruth crossed her arms. "You want her or not?" Caleb's massive hand reached out, and Mary flinched, but he didn't grab her. He simply laid his palm gently against her shoulder. "She comes with child," he said. "You know what that means?" Ruth looked away. "It means she's your problem now." Caleb studied Mary for a long, silent moment. Rain poured off his hat brim and spattered on her face, but he didn't move. Then finally he nodded once.
"Fine," he said.
"But once she steps on my land, she's mine." Ruth said nothing more. She took the cow's rope, turned without looking back, and disappeared into the darkness. Mary stood there shivering, mud up to her ankles, her breath coming in broken gasps. The wagon creaked as Caleb climbed aboard. "Get in," he said quietly. His tone wasn't harsh, just heavy, like a man carrying more weight than the world should allow. As they rode away, Mary looked back one last time. The light from her mother's window flickered once, then went dark. That was the moment she knew. She'd been erased from her mother's life, like chalk washed off a blackboard. Ahead of her, the plains stretched out endless and black, beneath a sky that seemed far too big for one frightened girl. But she didn't know yet that the stranger beside her, this giant cowboy with eyes like stormlight, would change everything, her fear, her shame, and maybe even her fate. The Boone Ranch sat miles beyond the last trace of civilization, where the land flattened into a vast plain, broken only by wind, rock, and a horizon that never ended. When the wagon rolled up before dawn, the rain had stopped, and the silence felt so deep it seemed alive. Mary could see the outline of the ranch house, huge, wooden, built for a man of Caleb's size. There were fences taller than her, stables that looked like fortresses, and horses big enough to pull mountains. She had never seen a place so wild and yet so still. When she tried to climb down, her legs buckled. Caleb caught her without effort, one hand steadying her as though she weighed nothing at all. Inside, the fire crackled in a stone hearth taller than she was. Caleb handed her a blanket and motioned toward the chair near the fire. She sat, unsure whether to thank him or run. He said nothing for a long time, only hung up his coat, poured himself a cup of coffee, and leaned against the counter. "You can stay," he said finally. "The storms are hard this season. You'll work for your keep." Mary nodded, her voice caught somewhere between fear and relief. "What kind of work?" she asked. "What you can," he replied. "Feed the hens. Boil the water. Rest when you need. The baby's coming soon, ain't it?" His tone was so calm it almost made her cry. No scolding, no pity, no disgust, just quiet acknowledgement. She nodded again. He handed her a piece of bread, warm and fresh. "Eat," he said simply, "and stop shaking." Days turned into weeks. The wind howled every night, and the plains shimmered under a sky so wide it made her dizzy. Caleb worked from sunrise to sunset, moving like a force of nature, fixing fences, carrying hay, mending barns. Despite his size, there was grace in his movements, a quiet rhythm. He spoke little, but when he did, his words carried weight. Mary found herself watching him, curious. She learned that he lived alone because no one could handle the storms, not the ones in the sky. He said, but the ones that came from inside the land. Then, one night, as she sat sewing by the fire, the walls began to tremble. The wind outside wasn't like any she'd ever heard. It moaned like a living thing, angry and ancient. Caleb stood at the window staring into the darkness. "Stay inside," he warned. "Don't open the door for anything." She wanted to ask why, but before she could, a thunderclap split the sky, and something enormous moved in the distance. A shadow shaped like a man, taller than the trees. Caleb's expression hardened. "They're awake again," he muttered. That night Mary couldn't sleep. She heard strange voices in the wind, whispering her name. When she finally drifted off, she dreamed of 3 massive shapes standing over her, their eyes glowing, their hands reaching toward her belly. She woke to find Caleb sitting beside her bed, a lantern in hand. "You heard them," he said quietly. She nodded, trembling. "What are they?" His gaze was distant. "Old things," he said. "The land remembers them, and they remember us." Mary gave birth under a sky full of lightning. The storm that night was worse than any before, tearing at the walls and howling through every crack of the house. Caleb never left her side. His giant hands were steady as he helped her breathe, helped her hold on. When the baby's first cry broke through the thunder, something shifted outside. The storm stopped, as if silenced by that sound. In the sudden stillness, Mary held her child close, tears streaming down her cheeks. Caleb stood at the window again, watching the horizon. "They'll leave now," he said softly. They wanted to hear it. Mary didn't understand, not fully, but she felt it. The air seemed lighter, the ground calmer. The next morning, she stepped outside for the first time since the birth. The sun rose over the plains, gold and endless. In the distance, she saw 3 enormous stone figures on the ridge, shapes she hadn't noticed before. Each one looked like a giant woman carved into the earth itself, their faces serene, eyes closed. Caleb joined her, his shadow falling over hers. "They protect this land," he said. "Long ago, before towns, before fences, they were the mothers of the earth. When the storms wake them, they look for what's been lost, life, birth, renewal. Last night, they found it again." He looked down at the child in her arms, his expression softer than she'd ever seen. "You gave the land what it needed. Now it will give back." Mary stared at him, the pieces falling into place. The voices, the dreams, the calm after the storm. It all made sense in a way that words couldn't explain. She realized the giant cowboy wasn't just a man. He was part of the same story, tied to the land and its spirits. And somehow, so was she. The shame, the fear, the pain her mother had cursed her with, it all washed away in that golden light. Years later, the people of Dry Creek told a new story. They said the Boone Ranch had become a place of healing, where the soil never dried and every spring brought double harvests. They said a woman and her child lived there with a man as tall as the sky, a man who could calm the storms with a whisper. Some called it superstition. Others said it was a miracle, but those who dared to ride close enough swore they saw 3 giant shadows watching over the ranch at dusk, guarding the woman who had been traded for a cow, but who ended up giving life back to the land itself. The bird that night, the wind returned, howling like a wounded animal. Mary woke to the sound of footsteps outside, heavy and rhythmic. Caleb stood at the window, his shoulders tense. "Stay in bed," he said, his voice suddenly low and fierce. "Don't open the door." She could see something flickering in his eyes, fear or maybe memory. Then came a sound like thunder, but closer, deeper. The whole house shuddered. Through the crack in the curtain, Mary saw shapes moving in the distance, tall as trees, slow and graceful, their eyes glowing faintly through the dark. "What are they?" she whispered. Caleb didn't answer right away. "They're older than this.